Your chainsaw ran yesterday, axe dead today, and what should have been a $20 fix now gets pushed into a $150, $200, sometimes $400 decision. That is the real problem with a lot of modern chainsaws. They are not always worse, but many of them are absolutely less repair friendly. I've been around small engines, yard tools, and chainsaw maintenance for more than a decade, and I keep seeing the same thing. People think the expensive part is the repair bill, but a lot of times the real cost is the time you waste chasing the wrong fault, the cheap parts that create new faults, and the machine life you burn up while guessing. So let's clear this up right now. This is not about saying every old saw was great and every new saw is junk. It's about understanding why older machines often came back to life with a cheap part, a cleaning, or a simple adjustment, while newer machines can turn one small failure into a sealed system problem you're not really invited to touch. That's why modern chainsaws frustrate so many DIY owners. It's usually not one evil design choice. It's a stack of choices. Tamper-resistant screws. Limited carburetor adjustment. Hidden access. Integrated modules. Emissions tuning. Safety lockouts. Proprietary electronics. Parts catalogs that push you toward assemblies instead of individual pieces. One change might be manageable. 5 changes together can make a basic repair feel like a trap. And here's the part most people miss. Some of these changes exist for real reasons. Emissions rules got tighter. Safety liability got bigger. Standardized assembly is faster for factories and dealers. A company would rather swap a module in 15 minutes than pay a tech to diagnose a tiny internal failure for an hour. That makes sense on paper. But for the owner standing in a garage with a saw that won't idle, it means a machine that looks more advanced can be a lot more closed off. Think about the old pattern. Bad fuel line. Replace the fuel line. Weak diaphragm in the carburetor, meaning the little flexible membrane that helps move fuel. Replace the kit. Dirty spark arrestor screen, meaning the tiny screen in the exhaust that catches sparks. Clean it. You were back in business cheap. Now compare that with a modern saw where the carb is limited, the ignition talks to another system, the handle assembly hides half the access, and the dealer says replacing the full unit is the approved fix. Same kind of symptom. Totally different money. The first big reason is anti-tamper design. And no, that is not just an annoyance. It changes what an average owner can realistically do. On older saws, if the carburetor was running off, you often had adjustment screws for high and low mixture. On newer saws, those may be capped, limited, oddly shaped, buried, or effectively not intended for you. A carburetor is the part that mixes fuel and air. If that mix goes wrong, the saw runs badly. Simple enough. But the path to correcting it is no longer simple. That matters because a bad adjustment is not just rough running. Too rich means too much fuel. The saw gets lazy, smoky, fouls plugs, and wastes fuel. Too lean means too little fuel. And lean is the dangerous one. Lean can run hot. Hot can score the cylinder. Score the cylinder and now a small tune issue becomes real engine damage. That is where a person thinks they are saving money, but they are actually destroying engine life. The second reason is modular replacement. This one catches people hard. Manufacturers and dealers love modules because modules are fast. Pull this off. Install that. Done. For them, that means consistent repair time and fewer diagnosis headaches. For you, it can mean replacing a whole carb assembly, whole ignition setup, whole handle section, whole battery interface, or whole control unit when one subpart is the actual problem. Cheap to install on the service side does not mean cheap to own on the customer side. That old saw in the corner might need a $10 fuel filter, a $15 line, and a half hour of cleaning. The newer one might need a factory assembly that costs more than the saw feels worth. And when the repair estimate starts getting too close to the replacement price, people give up. That is how a repairable tool gets turned into a disposable purchase decision. Now here's where I want you to pause and check your own machine. Go look at your chainsaw right now. Find the model sticker. Take a picture of it. If you cannot identify the exact model in 30 seconds, every repair decision after that gets slower, dumber, and more expensive. That one step alone speeds up about 80% of parts lookup and diagnosis later. The third reason is emissions and auto-tuning systems. And to be fair, this is not fake progress. Modern chainsaws can start easier, run cleaner, use less fuel, and stay more consistent across weather and elevation changes. Some of that is genuinely useful. But the trade-off is that the old backyard fix of turning a screw and listening for idle quality does not always apply anymore. Some systems are managing fuel or ignition in a more controlled way, and when they fail, They fail in ways that are harder for a casual owner to read. That's why most people misdiagnose newer saws. They think the symptom points to the same cause it would have on an older machine. Not always. A stumble off idle might still be fuel delivery. But it could also be an air leak, a sensor-related issue on certain systems, or an electronic strategy protecting the machine. If you use old-school guessing on a newer design, you can burn a lot of time and money fast. The fourth reason is liability and safety systems. This is where I slow down on purpose. Because this part matters. Chain brake issues, clutch issues, anti-kickback components, electronic brakes on some battery tools, and safety interlocks are not casual experiment areas. The chain brake is the mechanism that stops chain rotation in a kickback event. The clutch is the part that transfers engine power to the chain when speed rises. If you do not understand how those systems work, and you start tearing into them with random advice from the internet, you are not just risking a bad repair. You are risking hands, face, and eyesight. So let's put a hard DIY boundary here. If the problem involves crankcase pressure testing, meaning checking engine sealing with the right tools, deep engine disassembly, clutch removal when you are unsure about thread direction, battery pack opening, BMS faults, meaning battery management system faults, control board repair, or chain brake damage, that is the point where a professional is the smarter move. Saving $30 is not worth turning a $300 to $800 tool into scrap, and it sure isn't worth a trip to the emergency room. The fifth reason is parts and service channel control. And honestly, this is often the real killer. A machine can be technically repairable and still be a terrible ownership experience if parts are hard to find, overpriced, bundled into assemblies, or locked behind dealer channels. That is when people say a saw is junk. Not always because the design is mechanically terrible, but because the ownership ecosystem makes small repairs unreasonable. So the real issue is not that all new chainsaws are bad. It is that you have to separate useful complexity from locked-down complexity. Useful complexity helps the tool run cleaner, safer, or more consistently without trapping you. Locked-down complexity takes a simple failure and turns it into an unpredictable bill. Now let's hit the wrong versus right part, because this is where people either save a machine or make it worse. Wrong number one is tearing into everything the second the saw acts up. You pull plastics, yank lines, lose fasteners, crack old fittings, strip screws, disturb seals, and now you've created two more problems before finding the first one. Right number one is starting with the fastest, cheapest, most reversible checks. Fresh fuel. Clean air filter. Spark plug condition. Chain tension. Bar oil flow. Tank venting. Basic compression feel. Fuel line condition. Impulse line condition, meaning the small line that helps the engine pulse signal operate the carburetor. That order matters. Because if the saw has stale fuel, a plugged filter, a flooded cylinder, or a blocked tank vent, you do not need to start shopping for expensive parts. You need to stop guessing and shrink the problem first. Wrong number two is random carb adjustment. This used to be common. People would watch one old video, turn screws by ear, and get lucky. On some modern saws, that approach is flat out wrong. If the model has limited adjustment, different tuning logic, or a deeper air leak problem, twisting the carb to compensate can hide the real fault for a minute and then cook the engine later. Right number two is asking one question first. Does this model even have reasonable DIY adjustment space, or am I trying to force an old repair mindset onto a new system? Wrong number three is the cheap replacement part trap. This one ruins a lot of saws. A bargain carburetor that meters fuel badly. A weak ignition module. A junk oil pump. A chain that stretches fast and cuts crooked. A random battery that the tool never really wanted to use. On paper you saved money. In real life you bought a second diagnosis problem. Right number three is using OEM or proven high-quality aftermarket parts for the critical stuff, especially fuel delivery, ignition, chain drive, and battery-related components. And yes, that third mistake is brutal. It is how people turn a saw that could have given them years more service into a machine that barely survives the season. The failure you notice is rarely the only damage. A bad carb can create lean running. Lean running creates heat. Heat takes away life a little at a time until the bill shows up later. This is why the real cost is bigger than the part price. First, there is direct repair cost. A $10 to $30 issue gets bundled into a $150 to $400 repair path. Second, there is downtime. If you heat with wood, maintain property, clean up storm damage, or rely on a saw for work, the machine being down costs you whether you see it on an invoice or not. Third, there is wear cost. Wrong fuel delivery, poor lubrication, dull chain load, and clogged cooling airflow quietly shorten engine life. Fourth, there is safety cost. Wrong chain fit, worn bar rails, bad brake function, cheap chain, or clutch trouble can go from annoying to dangerous fast. So how do you decide whether a chainsaw is worth repairing at all? Use this 5-point test. Number 1, parts availability. Can you find the air filter, spark plug, chain size, bar, carburetor or battery, and a few common service items in minutes, not hours? Number 2, access. Can you reach basic service points without disassembling half the saw? Number 3, integration. Will one small failure force a whole assembly replacement? Number 4, repair cost ratio. If the likely repair cost is getting too close to the replacement cost, especially on a low-end saw, that repair value is weak. Number 5, machine class. A pro-grade saw may cost more upfront but often has better long-term parts support and serviceability than the cheapest entry-level model. That last point surprises people. The cheapest saw to buy is often not the cheapest saw to own. A bargain machine with weak support can become a repair trap fast. A better supported machine can cost more on day one and still save money over years because normal wear items stay available and the structure is easier to service. Here's a 60-second buying check I wish more people used. Before you buy any saw, search the exact model. Pull up the parts diagram. Check the price and availability of 3 common items. Air filter, ignition module, clutch cover, or battery if it's electric. Then scan what owners complain about most. If you cannot quickly understand those parts and those pain points, that machine is waving a red flag at you before you even own it. Now let's do symptom triage, because this is how you stop random part swapping. If the saw will not start at all, begin with fuel, spark, compression feel, switch function, plug condition, and whether it is flooded. Do not jump straight to the most expensive module. If it starts and dies when you hit the throttle, look at fuel delivery, filter condition, carb diaphragm condition, tank venting, impulse signal, and intake leaks. If it idles but falls on its face in the cut, look at chain sharpness, bar drag, oiling, exhaust blockage, and whether it might be running lean. If the chain keeps loosening, overheating, or cutting crooked, check chain spec match, bar wear, sprocket condition, tensioning setup, and lubrication. If a battery saw cuts out or derates power, suspect thermal protection, contact issues, cell condition, BMS behavior, or risky battery compatibility before assuming the motor is dead. And stop for another quick check. Go look at 4 things on your own saw right now. Chain specification, bar oil flow, air filter condition, model tag. Those 4 details tell you an amazing amount about whether your problem is maintenance, wear, wrong parts, or a deeper fault. Without them, you are just throwing guesses at a machine. Here's the bonus tip, and this is the one worth saving. Before you buy horsepower, price, or brand hype, check repair visibility. Look up the exploded parts diagram and 3 items only. The air filter, the ignition module, the clutch cover, or the battery on an electric model. If you cannot find clear sources and realistic prices for those parts in 5 minutes, that saw is probably a repair trap. Not definitely, but probably. And that one habit will save you from more bad purchases than arguing about engine size ever will. Because that is the whole game. The real trap is not that a chainsaw fails. Everything mechanical fails eventually. The trap is when a simple failure gets turned into a sealed system problem you were never meant to solve cheaply. So before you decide to repair or replace, check your model number, confirm your chain spec, inspect your air filter, and see whether normal parts are actually easy to buy. And if you've ever had a tiny chainsaw problem turn into a ridiculous repair quote, you're not crazy. You probably ran straight into the gap between a tool that works and a tool that still gives you the right to keep it working.